Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome everybody to the Monday, February 18th regular session of the Speedway Redevelopment Commission meeting. And let me take this opportunity to introduce the commission. On my immediate right is Gordon Rundle, commission member. Immediately to my left is Brody Duncan, vice president of the commission. To his left is Rhonda Schwartz, secretary of the commission. And her left is Dr. Terry Reed, who is the commission member representing the Speedway School Corporation. We also have staff in attendance. My very far right is Mr. Tim Gropp, who is our Economic Development Director and Redevelopment Director, as well as Tim Ramian, who's in our audience, and he's our Executive Assistant. We also have David Rainey, who's with the Veritas Group, and we'll hear from David a little bit later on in some of our project updates. Did want to remind everybody that this meeting notification was posted as according to Indiana law, and I have established that we do have a quorum to conduct business. So the next item of the agenda is we'd like to open it up to public commentary. So if there's anybody in the audience that would like to come to the lectern and provide some comments, and please state your name, even though we know you all, but please state your name for the record.
Good evening. My name is Jennifer Miller. I'd like to talk a little bit tonight about the proposed development for the 1300 block. I initially saw the designs during one of your previous meetings, and I was really excited to see that the facade of the bell helmet portion of the building had a unique facade, differentiating it from the rest of the building. But in a more recent update to that design, I noticed that the facade had changed to actually match the rest of the building. And it so happens to match the rest of the past 5 or 6 buildings that have been built on Main Street. It's typically a brick facade with some limestone accents. And I get it, Main Street is just steps away from the Brickyard, and with historic buildings like Allison Plant 1 and the Rosner building, it's easy to make those selections to match the brick and the limestone. But when you have so many buildings that look like that on Main Street, it tends to get all jumbled together, and you don't really kind of take the time to really look at the buildings. An example is, let's say for the next 7 days for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, I said that you were to eat cheese pizza for every meal, just cheese pizza. My guess is by day 3 or 4, you'd probably be pretty bored of cheese pizza, and you would stop even paying attention to what you were eating. Now, there's a book that I read in school that talks about this theory. It's called Complexity and Contradiction in Architecture. It's a short book, and it has lots of pictures. It's by Robert Venturi. I would recommend it. Okay. There is one example on Main Street that kind of stands out and catches my eye every time that I drive up and down, and that's the Delara building. It has a large expanse of glass, and not only that, but it's curved. And it just, every time I drive by, it kind of catches my eye and wakes me up from driving up and down the street. And I understand that there was some concern with the original design of the bell helmet portion of the building. It was kind of stark white with some bright red and black accents to it, which is quite a contrast to the rest of the brick. But there are products out there that could match the color of the brick or even limestone color, but it would help give a different module to the facade and maybe kind of make your eye look a little bit deeper. So I would just ask that the commission contemplate advocating for architects currently and in the future to look beyond brick and give the Main Street streetscape some inspiration.
Jennifer, I do have a question. Mm-hmm. Are you focused solely on the Bell building rather than the one to the south? I mean, if the one to the south also had the brick facade, you feel that variance or that difference in the appearances would still give it a unique look rather than having cheese pizza all the way up and down Main Street?
I mean, I'm an advocate for whatever, but I thought we could start small and maybe at least give the helmets a little differentiator.
I did mention to Jennifer that, and I'll touch on this in our reports, but the developer will be at the State of the Town tomorrow, and that she might want to also have this conversation with Shelby tomorrow night.
Yeah, I certainly hope that you have that opportunity and you know Shelby, you've
Yes.
worked with Shelby, and I know that they'll be open to, all suggestions. I know that we've gotten some preliminary pricing, but I believe the developer is also going back and looking at the designs and the pricing again. We're still working towards trying to negotiate a final economic development agreement. So we hope to move that along relatively quickly, because I know that's one of our priorities for this calendar year. Anybody have any other questions of Jennifer?
Did you feel that it looked, that the previous rendition blended well, or did it look too modern? Because one of the feedback that we got from the OSCNA was that we don't want something that looks too modern right there.
Sure, of course. And like I said, the white was pretty stark against the rest
Sure.
of the brick building, but they make metal panels that are the color of brick or limestone. So you could get a pretty similar match, but at least it has a little bit of a different look to it.
Might even be a little bit more cost-effective than
Yes.
brick?
Yes.
I was going to say, did we have any cost estimates between the two renderings?
I don't
Not
believe
between the
they
two
did.
renderings,
Farther.
they only costed out the current one, which
Yeah.
had the brick on there. So that, I think we'd be open to that conversation, and like I said, I think a good first step would be talk to Shelby tomorrow night. And you guys will probably have a much more fruitful conversation than I would jumping into that, so.
Yeah, and I encourage you, and look forward to seeing you tomorrow.
Yes, thank you. I
Great. And
appreciate
thank you
your
for your
time.
comments, Jennifer, appreciate it. And always appreciate your attendance. Any further comments from the audience? All right, let's move on to the next agenda item, and that is the meeting minutes of our regular session of, and that was Tuesday, January 22nd, if I recall correctly, our last regular session meeting. And those meeting minutes had previously been distributed by our executive assistant, and I believe that everybody had the opportunity to comment and propose any suggested edits. So unless I hear any further suggested edits, hearing none, we'll go ahead and accept those meetings by consent. Okay, the next item is our approval of claims and expenses, which again had been distributed previously as well as within our packet. And if those of you that didn't have an opportunity to take a look at those very thoroughly, please do. It's only a one-page document this month, so I'm really kind of pleased with that.
This is as close to what I'd call standard expenses per month as we'd come, minus the snow removal. Everything else in there is just operating expense.
It's great to see it on one sheet.
And we've been hit with a few little snowfalls.
Don't get used to it.
Yeah. Tim, is there anything unusual, out of the ordinary? I know you said this is fairly customary and what we hope to see in the future, with the exception of our bond payments coming up in the future.
Yeah, no, nothing out of the ordinary at all.
Yeah, anybody have any questions of Tim relative to the claims? Well, I'll entertain a motion to accept the claims and expenses as distributed.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to approve the claims as distributed.
I have a motion on the table. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Let's take it to a vote. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Motion passes 4-0. Thank you. All right, now we're going to move on to our project updates. And for our first project update, the Wilshaw project, I'd like to ask David Rainey with Veritas Group to come to the lectern and share with us your insight, David.
All right. Thank you, Mr. President. My name is David Rainey with Veritas Group. So I've got several updates with regard to the building, some parking update, and then also some exterior landscape, hardscape type updates. So for the building, the north building is nearly completed. We expect that that's going to get turned over here at the end of February. If you recall, when we were at our tour, they mentioned that there are actually 3 leases of the 45 units that are on that building. So move-in for those are expected 3/1, March 1st, for 3 residents to move in. The south building is continuing to be worked on. That's anticipated to be completed mid-March. They're working on finishes, painting, appliances are being installed. They're punching out a lot of those items as they continue. That building also has 3 leases on that And so, and I believe the move-in dates for those are late March and beginning of May. So,
Oh, okay.
so 6 total leases.
Signed, sealed, and almost to be delivered.
Of the 90 units, six done. So now with the turnover of the north building, that's going to open up the parking lot. So I know Mr. Gropp and I are going to have a meeting this week with Scannell to talk about how the logistics of that with the public parking and the resident parking, how that's going to work. I did kind of want to recap, because I know at the last SRC meeting and then as well at the tour, there were some questions about the parking. So if you recall, per the EDA Addendum 3, there are 214 spaces that are supposed to be constructed. 55 of those are to be dedicated to public parking. The current plan that's in place to be constructed, there's going to be a total of 243 spaces constructed. Okay, that would include the triangle lot and the auxiliary lot, basically just east of the hotel, which is not constructed yet.
Does that include the interior parking as well?
It does. Yep. So that there's, and I think there was a question on that when we had our tour. There's 11 spaces in the north building, and there's 23 in the south building. Okay. So it's important to note that when the lot opens up here later in February, after the north building is turned over, there'll be 179 spaces available total. Okay, that'll be the main lot, which is constructed. There's an auxiliary lot with, I believe, 20 spaces in it, plus the 11 in the north building. Okay, and then once the south building is completed, then we'll have an additional 23 spaces from that building of the interior that will be added to that total. So in the end here, by mid-March, there'll be 202 spaces open, okay? And again, of that, 55 are dedicated to public parking. So that threw a bunch of numbers out there, but I wanted to kind of recap all that for you. And then, of course, once the hotel project comes on board, then the balance of those parking spaces will be built out, 41 spaces. 35 of them are in the triangle lot, and then 6 directly across from the hotel. Okay?
Dave, real quick on
Yeah.
that too. So I invited Tom to our meeting on Thursday as well.
Perfect.
I was a little surprised that the first move-in dates had been moved up to March 1st, and there's a whole communications aspect to this that needs to be rolled out to the community to get businesses to make sure they know those spots are now available. We have questions about signage, how they're going to monitor those spots, because the 55 spots are not for employees, they're for 3-hour parking, so you can
Right.
go to the businesses and turn around. We don't know how they're going to sign it. We don't know how they're marking that there's public parking available. So those are the questions we have. Then we have to turn around and start communicating that with the community. So I think there is going to be a little learning curve and an area that's going to be adjustment, if you will, to get people used to that area. Also, on top of that, we have promised Conkle Funeral Home, who has been wonderful through this whole thing and let us overstay our welcome on their 11 spots, that we would give those up when this lot was ready. So we also need to communicate with the business owners that are in Conkle's lot that that will no longer be available to them as of March 1st, and we'll have to make that adjustment as well with those businesses.
And these 55 spots are replacement for the lot that was previously there, correct?
Correct.
That's right. Mr. Hitchcock with Scannell did say that they have some ideas that they're working on, and we're looking forward to hearing what those are going to be on Thursday. So the other part of my update is I wanted to make you all aware, too, that as far as the exterior of the buildings, if you've driven by recently, you might notice that there's some areas of the building that have not been completed as far as painting. The weather temperatures have been such that they can't complete the painting right now. They're anticipating as soon as weather permits, they're going to complete that. But it brings to the point of when the building's actually substantially complete and they're turned over, it's potentially likely that the buildings will not be completed as far as painting. The landscaping and some hardscape will not be done as well. So we've asked and worked with Scannell and asked them to provide a bond for the balance of that work since the buildings will be substantially complete, we wanted a bond in place to cover that value until it is done. And so I think the only other thing, as far as the hardscape is concerned, in addition, if you've walked along Main Street, the sidewalk along Main Street, you'll notice some damage to the sidewalks. That's happened through construction. That's common. Man lifts have been driven on there, et cetera. Nonetheless, existing sidewalks have been damaged. I've talked with CRG. They've already actually talked to Mr. Walters. And come here shortly, I'll set up a meeting with Scannell, CRG, and Mr. Walters and myself. We'll look at and inspect all of the existing concrete and determine what needs to be replaced, and then that will be taken care of. We've also made it known that all of this work, absolutely, any sidewalk needs to be open prior to any May festivities, so.
Sure. David, I do have a
Yeah.
question. The north building, towards the south end of the first floor, there appears to be some interior lighting. So I don't know whether that has just been done to have lighting within that space, or whether they've got some leases under agreement for retail establishments.
There is temporary lighting in that space.
So that's just the temporary lighting?
Yes.
Okay.
That wouldn't be anything that would be permanent. Now, they will keep that temporary lighting in there
Yeah.
until that space is leased out.
Well, it just looks like nice,
yeah.
hung, globed lighting.
Right.
And it just gives the impression that, well, possibly they've already got a tenant under lease. So,
That I'm aware they do not at this
Okay.
point.
There's been some interest and there's some conversations ongoing, but no official
Okay.
leases have been signed on the retail aspect yet.
great.
One thing I'd like to point out from the walkthrough, thank you, by the way, for taking us all on the tour.
Absolutely.
That first floor space will not be built out because it will be customized to whoever the end user is. So
Correct.
even though there will be people living in the space until that first floor is under contract, it will continue to appear to be unfinished.
That's right. That's right.
Just want to make that, for anybody that's walking by, peeking their head in there, so.
Okay. That's all I have. If there's any other questions, do you want me to provide any update on the hotel?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
While it remains unfinished, is the glass going to be clear, or is there going to be, like a?
I don't have an answer, but I can certainly get that answer for you.
Find that out when
I
we.
mean, typically, they're not going to go through a lot of effort to put anything up in those windows in a white box situation like that, but I can certainly find out.
And then,
Brokerage signs.
well, even the,
Just paper?
yeah, something, that perforated tint almost that they'll put in a lot of, privacy screen type of.
I've seen it happen,
Yeah.
and it doesn't happen in every instance, so we
I
can
was
find out.
curious.
If there's a preference for the SRC that they do that, we can certainly communicate that to Scannell.
And then the hardscaping and landscaping that's bonded, when's the anticipated completion for that?
So weather permitting, I mean, they're going to start that. I've talked with CRG. As far as the hardscape, they're going to initially start that as soon as possible. There is a space on the, I guess it'd be the very south side of the parking lot. There's a sidewalk that's planned there. It's only partially constructed. They're leaving that open so that they can get equipment in and out of that space to finish the exterior. Once the exterior is done, then they can start proceeding with that hardscape. So I anticipate that'll move forward rather quickly,
Okay, good.
as long as we don't have too cold of temperatures. So with regard to the hotel, I don't have a whole lot of update. I have reached out to Loftus Robinson and did get a response from them that they've completed a VE process with Wilhelm Construction. According to the email I received today, they have released Wilhelm. Now, I wouldn't anticipate to see a trailer or start of construction out there at this point. We've not seen any of those VE updates. They say that they were going to provide us with drawings and renderings, which we need to see those renderings of the exterior facade. And then once we have that page turn, we can proceed and get Wilhelm out there. So
It appeared by the email that most of the changes were interior not even room, just structural changes that aren't going to affect much. There was just one that seemed like it might have an impact on the exterior. So in general, it didn't seem too drastic, but
No.
we want to see updated plans before we move anything forward.
And they're anticipating that to be the second or third week of March. So
Okay.
when we'll see those plans. Okay?
Any other questions of David? David, thank you very much for a very thorough update.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right, let's move on to the next project update, 2500 North High School Road. Tim, if you'd like to give us that update.
Yeah, so a lot going on up at 2500 High School Road. Several ongoing conversations with prospects are underway. We should be engaging on our side with bond counsel here real soon. So the big document that needs to get done is the funding agreement, which outlines exactly how this project will move forward. We are ready to sign the purchase agreement that had been drafted and reviewed by our legal counsel. They'd like to get that signed sooner than later so they can have a little more authority to negotiate with some of these. So I had a long conversation with the Circle K folks today, and everything seems to be in line. There's just a lot of, it's very complicated coordination between when we're going to have infrastructure and dirt work done versus when they need to shut down so they can move. They will actually close for a while, which was a nice surprise for us. We thought they'd want to try and stay open, but they realized it was almost impossible to have them stay open and prepare the new site. So there's still a lot of paperwork and hoops to jump through to make that deal work. We have met with the owners of El Rodeo about some improvements around their property and some potential land swap where we'll wait to hear back from them from that meeting. There's ongoing conversations with the cell tower about some excess land that they have that we'd like to acquire. So everything's in motion. There's some utility conversations. There's still the IPL line that goes through the site, so we have to deal with that. That's the majority of it. Had to think through there. So everything seems to be going well. There's a couple aspects I need to circle back with on infrastructure. One of them being the current path that's along there, to see if it's possible to widen that for multi-trail accessibility. I've mentioned a few times, but the drawings I've seen don't show it, and the right-of-way looks kind of tight, so I want to go back and make sure we address that before we move anything further. Beyond that, it'll come down to figuring out the final funding, deciding how we want to move forward with that. So everybody seems to be on pace and wanting to get this thing started sooner than later, so
That's great.
haven't hit a pitfall yet, so that's good.
Anybody have any questions of Tim concerning the update 2500? Great, thank you very much for that update. Let's move on to the 1300 block. We've already addressed that to a certain extent, but if you give us a little bit more of an update on that project.
Sure. As was mentioned, initial numbers came back from a contractor. We have our team kind of taking a look at those, and the developers team is looking at those as well. We think they might be a hair low. So he is going out and getting a secondary estimate to compare some construction numbers. And then we'll sit down at the table. I think the important update right now is there will be announcement on this, and it's mostly for marketing purposes. We understand there's no official deal in place right now, but kind of to get the developer started with some pre-leasing opportunities and just test the market a little bit. He wants to get that out there. I think we're all excited about the project. It's putting the final pieces together. So you'll see a little bit more action on this. Everybody's really excited to get this moving, but we got to make sure it makes sense. It's a pretty big project on a small parcel. It's that's about 1 acre total. Between the two of us, we had to spend a lot of money to acquire that 1 acre as well. So it makes the pro forma a little more difficult, but we want to make sure it's also a centerpiece for Main Street. It's dead center. It's going to be very visible, as Jennifer pointed out. So we don't want to rush it in the aspect that we want to get it right, but we're excited to kick it off as well. On that note, I did talk to Will Cox again today. We're still waiting for a final decision from the insurance carrier as to which direction they want to go for environmental. I continue to push them and would like them to be done by April with that whole remediation, so they're not in our way when we do move forward.
Anybody have any further questions of Tim regarding 1300? Thank you again, Tim. The next item is our Economic Development Strategic Plan, and that planning initiative. There was a steering committee meeting last Thursday on the 14th. Unfortunately, I was not able to attend. But during that meeting, they had established our public input session, which gives the opportunity for all stakeholders, not just citizens, but all stakeholders to the Speedway community, to provide any input. And that meeting is scheduled for March 20th from 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. at the Speedway Public Library. Either Brody or Tim, do you want to provide any additional comments regarding the process at this stage?
I think the process will mirror our previous public input sessions. It won't be necessarily a presentation, it'll be more kind of free-flowing, and encourage the community to come out and provide input and ask questions.
We would note, we do realize this is the night moving into spring break.
Before spring break.
The night before spring break in Speedway is not necessarily our first choice. There was some scheduling conflicts there. We were on a pretty tight schedule with this Speedway Economic Development Strategic Plan. That's mostly due, we knew that going in, it's mostly due to the grant requirements of when we have to have it done. So we've been staying pretty steady on it and turning things around pretty quick. We will be having a joint session of SRC and council, which I'll send an invite out March 11th for input on the recommendations. And then, as you said, we'll have a public input session on March 20th. And then final approval will come back to you guys. It'll come to the SRC on April 15th at our April meeting, and council on April 22nd. So that's a pretty aggressive timeline, but we feel like we're on target and things are moving smoothly.
Well, I'd also encourage any of the general public to either watch the YouTube channel for those two sessions, or please attend personally the SRC meeting, and the council meeting in April. This really is going to establish a good footing and a foundation for our continued future redevelopment of the community. And I think it's a very important process, and it follows up on the original master plan that was developed many years ago. And again, I just want to make sure that everybody realizes strategic plans and master plans are dynamic documents. They live and breathe and they change. But I think that we're at a great point where we'll have some excellent guidance for our future generations. Anybody have any further questions about? Great. Yeah.
One more comment, just in regards to the survey. We extended the survey an additional week, so it'll close at the end of this week. You can go to speedwayIN.gov, and there's a link on the webpage to the SRC Economic Development Plan Survey. It's 30 questions. You don't have to be a Speedway resident to fill it out. It's kind of a broad-based survey, and we'd encourage everybody to take that survey and try to get it out to as many people as possible for feedback. So,
Thank you for that reminder, Brody. All right, let's move on to our new business agenda items. The first item of business that we have is the approval of demolition contract for the structure as well as the tank removal for the recently acquired property at 4501 West 16th Street. All that documentation and the bids that had been solicited by staff had been previously distributed. Does anybody have any questions regarding those bids or the summaries? I think it was fairly self-explanatory. Tim, nice job in putting the summary together.
I'll thank Tim, other Tim.
Tim, nice job in putting the summary together.
And do we want to review why we separated the tank removal from the?
Sure.
Just the,
Well, the tank removal was an entirely separate project. In fact, we have it a little later
Sure.
on the agenda. We had just gotten a quote for tank removal. As we were getting these demo quotes on the building, it was brought to our attention that one of the quotes also did that type of work. We felt it not a bad thing to go out and get a second bid on that and see if we're in the ballpark. And then as we reviewed it even further, we realized that the way we had structured the original quote was actually adding some money that we didn't need to pay on the original estimate because we were basically subbing out the subcontractor to have somebody else manage it. So we're gonna actually hire the subcontractor for the removal separately and then have Wilcox do the oversight. And then the reporting. So they'll do the testing, the report writing, and all the communication with IDEM. We'll manage the contract instead of them managing the contract for the actual tank removal. So we ended up getting two quotes on it to compare, and they were within about $200 of each other.
So what we'll do right now is we'll consider the offers for the demolition of the building. And I believe we have a recommendation from staff to accept the low bid, low offer, which is raised demolition at $16,875.
With the addition of the tree and brush removal, the total cost would be $19,375.
Tree removal was an alternate.
It was.
Right. So any further questions concerning staff recommendation? Hearing none, I'll accept a motion to accept the low offer.
Mr. President, I move that we accept the demolition contract for 4501 West 16th Street with raised demolition.
Do I have a second?
I just have one more question, quick
Yeah.
question. So they're aware that the other folks are going to remove the tank. It's not going to affect their progress, you know what I'm saying?
These are two
people,
totally different projects.
but at the same site, correct?
They're at the same
Sure,
site.
correct,
yeah.
So you're exactly right.
So I'm just, one's not going to step on another one's toes and
No, that-
come back
we're-
and drive the price up. but they're
We're going to
just-
coordinate
Okay.
that, and it doesn't really matter which one goes first, but I'm probably going to coordinate the tank removal first. It's about getting on their calendars, so I will let Ray's know that we got to coordinate. Now, if by chance Ray says, well, we can get this thing down next week, I'll go ahead and say, go ahead and get it on the calendar, because we're going to be, with the ground being so hard and we got to dig, it's going to take a little longer to get on the tank removal schedule.
Above ground work's easier to do.
Exactly.
I just want to make sure they were aware that somebody else was coming on site. It wasn't going
Absolutely.
to affect their bid, cause a change order or whatnot.
We had one quote that was able, Denny Excavating actually has the ability to do both, so they bid on both. Ray's does not have the proper permitting necessary to do the tank removal, so.
That's fine.
So that's why it was split up the way it was.
Yeah, I don't,
And vice versa with Hoosier Equipment. Or no, they did bid.
They
the,
bid.
They actually ended up
That's correct, yes.
bidding both as well, so.
okay.
Okay.
Well, thank you.
Does that respond to your question?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I still have a motion on the table. Do I have a second?
I'll second the motion.
We have a motion and a second to accept the low offer received by staff. Any further discussion, questions? Let's take it to a vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain?
Abstained.
We have a motion that passed, 3-0 with one abstention. Thank you. The next item of new business is the approval of the engineering contract with Veritas Group for our 16th Street and Main Streetscape design and cost estimates. Tim, do you want to give a little overview of the proposed scope of services?
Yeah, so this is a newer project. We haven't really discussed it at a public session here. With the improvements done by USAC on their building, I think it's motivated others in the area to possibly do some investment as well. And looking at everything we've done on Main Street and Wilshaw being across the street, that area in front of them, it was actually USAC that came to us and asked if we'd do some improvements in our right-of-way area to kind of pull the Main Street field down 16th Street a little bit, which we thought was a really good idea. At this point, we want to make sure that if we're going to make that investment, Mr. Bunch, who owns the building next to USAC, has indicated a possibility of doing some facade improvements there. So we want to see that investment prior to us investing as well. But we want to kind of get a scope put together. We want to see what those costs will be. We got to do a lot of survey work in this area. We ran into a survey issue with our parking lot as well when USAC was working. This is an older part of town where some of the lines are a little iffy, if you will. So this will get a survey work done on 16th Street, a little bit on Main to verify where the right-of-way lines are, and then Veritas would then do a couple options for pulling Main Street around. We are looking at making a few changes based on the accelerated. How do I say this? How poorly some of Main Street has held up. The brick pavers have not held up well. I'll get it out eventually here. So we want to maybe look at changing those to a stamped concrete pattern instead.
Something more durable.
Something more durable and just clean up the lighting a little bit. So the scope for this would be from basically right after our parking lot entrance there at the corner down to Cord Street. So widening the sidewalk through that area, adding some benches and trash cans and some decorative lighting. There's some non-attractive lighting there now. There's still a bus stop that'll be incorporated. And also looking if there's any parking options that could be added there. One concern we get in that area is traffic flow and speed. So see if there's ways we can calm the traffic in that intersection as well. So this scope gets us to that point that we can then take those recommendations to the adjacent business owners and see if they'd like to partner with us to kind of pull that beautification down there. I thought the scope was very reasonable from Veritas, so we would recommend that.
Anybody have any further questions concerning the scope, proposal, or Tim's comments? All right, well, I'll entertain a motion to accept the Veritas Group Civil Engineering Services for the 16th Street Improvement Project.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion for the approval of the engineering contract with Veritas Group for 16th and Main Streetscape.
Okay, I have a motion on the table. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion, questions? Let's take it to a vote. All those in favor of accepting the Veritas Group Civil Engineering Services proposal for 16th Street improvements, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion passes 4-0. Thank you, Tim.
All right.
All right, let's move on to our old business, and this brings us back to 4501 West 16th Street, and this relates to the buried tank removal, which we had touched on during the discussion of the building demolition proposal. So,
Yeah.
Tim?
So as we mentioned, we originally had one proposal that was all encompassing. We broke out the subcontractor work to save some money. There was a markup by having Wilcox do that. So either way, it was going to save us money. We ended up getting two quotes to make sure we weren't off basis on anything. There is a caveat to both these quotes, actually. We don't exactly know what's in the tanks. So the testing we did on the Phase 2 indicated that there's not much concern. A lot of times back in this era when these tanks were in service, they didn't want to waste anything, so they'd backfill them with sand or sometimes nothing, or gravel, pea gravel. So we don't have much concern on it, but we just don't know. So if there's a chance that we get to them, we have to pump a bunch of stuff out, then there could be a slight additional cost, and that's, you can see down there that there's, sludge drumming, water disposal, things like that in the quotes. I believe you have both these quotes. So, but in general, the two estimates, Hoosier Equipment Services was $12,861. Denny Excavating was $13,000. So we're recommending approval of Hoosier Equipment Services, Inc. for the tank removal, and then Wilcox Environmental to do the oversight in the amount of $5,603. They will be on site during the removal. They will do testing once the tanks are pulled. They will then write up the reports and file everything necessary through IDEM for us.
Right. Any further questions concerning either the Hoosier or the Wilcox recommendation? All right, I'll entertain a motion to accept the Hoosier Equipment Service proposal as well as the Wilcox Environmental Engineering USD closure offer. Do I have a motion?
Mr. President, I'll make a motion to approve the contract with Hoosier Equipment to remove the tank and Wilcox to manage the environmental aspects.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, I've got a motion and a second. Any further discussion, questions? Let's take it to a vote. All those in favor of accepting the two proposals signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained?
Abstained.
Okay, motion passes 3-0 with one abstention. Thank you. That brings us to our director's report. And I know that you've
Get comfy.
shared an awful lot of information with us this evening, Tim. Do you have anything else that you would like to add?
A couple of updates that we've discussed, just for SRC knowledge. We did meet with a vendor had approached us about possibly selling coffee and tea on our property on 16th Street. We did meet with this vendor. It seems reasonable to do, and we're just working through a proposal that would make sense. Some of this is hinging on, delays with demoing a building and pulling out tanks and everything. But both of us kind of agreed that we'd maybe work out the logistics of having somebody on there for morning time rush hour and just do a couple months to see if it works out and makes any sense, and then go from there. So we'll circle back with everybody and let you know what we decided on that. But logistically and just everything else, it seemed like a pretty good fit, and something that we should take a look at to generate a little bit of money in the interim. And then also I met with the billboard company as well. So we discussed our options there, and they're supposed to be presenting me with some proposed language, which we will review and make just a recommendation back to the SRC as to what we'd like to do in the interim while we work on a long-term plan for that property as well on 16th Street. Just another note as well. Next level grants. So Allison Duncan in particular, I don't know if anyone knows her or not, works very hard on getting grant applications for the B&O Trail prepared and submitted for extending the B&O Trail through what's called the Next Level Grant Program. So this is a grant program that was originally funded through what was going to be toll road increases. I've heard that might have shifted, but the money's still going to be allocated for extensions of trails throughout the state of Indiana. There's going to be 3 rounds of grants, and we were very supportive any way that we were able to on the extension of the B&O Trail, both from Michigan Road in Indianapolis up to Speedway, and then also from where our trail ends out to the Hendricks County line. I believe that actually one grant application goes then into Hendricks County as well. So we're very excited that those got submitted. There's going to be a lot of applications for what sounds like a lot of money, ends up not being a lot of money. And then you have a lot of regions of the state, and so we'll see. We're cautiously optimistic, but there will be another round. They've broken it into 3 rounds of grants, but wonderfully put together. What's I really appreciated about this grant round request from us was the multi-jurisdictional aspect, because it involved Indianapolis, it involved Speedway Trail Association, the Central Indiana Foundation, Community Foundation, just multiple groups, and it was all coordinated, mostly in part by Allison for that, so we appreciate that. And then we also supported another grant application through the city of Indianapolis for the completion, I guess there's already a portion done, of the Eagle Creek Trail as well. So, second phase of the Eagle Creek Trail, which would connect our B&O Trail up to Eagle Creek Park, which I think would be a fantastic quality of life, quality of place aspect for the community. So I did see a note back from them that they got their application in. I saw they also applied for Fall Creek Trail, which I was not aware they were doing. So again, we don't want to dilute the pool too much, and we don't know how much money's going to Central Indiana versus other aspects, but a lot of people worked very hard. We supported with support letters, and we've done a lot of our part as well by having our trail portion done, but we'll be excited to hear if we get these, and if we don't, we'll be ready to reapply for the second round immediately.
Great.
So,
Well, thank you for that update, Tim. Any of the commission members have anything you'd like to add before we adjourn?
The Chamber of Commerce is putting on the Mardi Gras pub crawl on Main Street March 1st, and then the St. Patrick's pub crawl is March 15th. And Taste of Speedway, I believe, is April 18th, but that's coming up too at Delaro,
Okay.
which is always a great event.
97 days until our favorite day in May.
Lord?
State of the town.
Yep. Just want to remind everybody, the State of a Town address is scheduled for tomorrow evening, and that location is going to be the new town center, formerly the PNC building at Lyndhurst and Crawfordsville Road. Doors open at 6 p.m. The event begins at 6:30. The Lions Club is providing some delicious cupcakes, so please come one, come all. And I just want to encourage everybody to support our Speedway businesses and industries and services, and I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Meeting adjourned.